How do girls act and learn differently than boys?
I'm not sure that there's a gender gap in terms of learning styles. I've always just figured different kids had different learning styles. And I don't know that they do. I try to cover a bunch of different learning styles, like, you know, there's kinesthetic learners and visual learners and auditory learners. And I find that girls are better behaved in class. And so it's possible that they're better visually or auditorially, because they're quieter. In lots of respects, they're more respectful. Like if you ask them to be quiet, they'll be quiet. Whereas boys sometimes like to push limits more.
Right.
Not that girls won't. I had a girl this year especially who was very outspoken, probably the hardest student I've had for a little while. But most of the times, if I have to exert any kind of managerial control, it's going to be with boys.
What are the most prominent and visible issues in school regarding gender, if any?
That's a good question. You know, one of the things I notice about girls is that their relationships with each other are really different than boys' relationships with each other. It seems like when boys have a fight, they don't do a bunch of backstabbing. Whereas girls are critical of appearances often, but girls are willing to talk about deeper ideas a lot of times. I don't know that girls are taken as seriously with regard to their comments. They don't have the gravitas. But I don't know if you remember us doing this in philosophy. This was to me one of the most bizarre things. So I asked the boys what bugged them about girls, and I asked the girls what bugged them about boys. And then we looked at it and we said, oh my gosh, if you look at all the boy things, like macho, confronted, non-emotional, so reasonable, rational, right? Not communicative, not necessarily too clean. They swear a lot. These are all things that in our culture we like. Whereas in our culture, if you say emotional, mysterious, non-confrontive, passive, sensitive, and changeable, those are things that we hate. So essentially what we have in our society are boys and girls all trying to be boys, which I think is weird. Why don't we value people who are more emotional, who show themselves, who are vulnerable, not confronted, people who are peaceful, people who are sensitive, people who do change in their demeanor? Why don't we value any of those things in our culture? And I think that the worst part about it isn't what it does to girls, it's what it does to boys. I think boys feel it, and they don't benefit from having women viewed in that way, because then they have to put on a mask, and they can't be emotional, and they can't be vulnerable. And in a lot of ways, they can't be honest.
What is the dress code, and what are your personal views on it? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree? Do you enforce it often?
I don't enforce it, but I think the dress code here is fine. I do think it's weird that you're not supposed to show your shoulders. But I kind of understand it in that at this time of life, boys have a hard time concentrating if a girl is showing too much skin. It's just how they are. The only people I've ever had to enforce the dress code on really were girls. But it wasn't because the boys were doing it and I wasn't enforcing it. The boys just weren't defying the dress code. I don't notice that guys are as concerned about their physical appearance as girls, to be honest with you. But they wear weird sandals in the winter time and shorts, and I just notice girls being a lot more aware of their physical appearance.
And do you think that's because of the media and how it's portrayed now?
Oh yeah, I think that's largely it. I don't notice a lot of beefcake commercials in magazines, on television.
Mhm.
You know, I don't even, in movies, I mean, you have, the hunks are people like George Clooney. I mean, you know, he's an old dude.
Is there any pressure from other students for girls to look a certain way or act a certain way, do you think?
You should ask her. So, this is Jessica Satterfield. She's my daughter.
Hello.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. So you don't feel any pressure from other students to fit in, dress a certain way, or act a certain way?
I don't, but I am also not really in tune to what other people want. I mean, there's definitely a common culture here of, you know, girls that get married really young and stay, you know, home and take care of kids and stuff. And so that I've noticed a lot with my friends, you know, when you talk about what you're gonna do after high school, a lot of them, you know, it's finding a husband.
As much input as they're getting from the media, I think it's being head off at the pass by their church leaders, and their parents are, you know, watchdogging them to make sure that they don't. Like, she has a friend who wears beautiful dresses to prom, but they're always extremely modest, and not so much fun.
Does the area of the school change the students' impact, do you think?
What do you mean?
Because Olympus is on the upper east side.
Oh, you mean like in terms of the city?
Mhm.
Definitely,
Yeah.
yeah.
How
I
do you
it
think
does.
this school changes from, say, a school in West Valley?
Well, this school particularly, we're kind of a school for the performing arts. I mean, we value people who can play musical instruments, people who can sing, people who can act, people who can do art work, and we live in the area of the city where those people live, as well as people who do math well and people who are doctors and lawyers. I mean, we live in that area, so that's what's valued in the school. And now, I don't know if the West Valley schools do or not, but, you know, the most coveted place in this school isn't the football team.
Do you think students are more pressured to fit in here rather than a West Side school? Or do you think it's the same, or do you think it's just different pressures that impacting you the same?
I shouldn't even be answering any of these questions about West Side schools. I've never been in one.
So if a girl is going through junior high, high school, and college, and then they move on to their life, do you think the pressure ever stops?
I think that's completely dependent upon the person. I think you can get there, but it takes a long, long time. And it depends, there's some people who are better at it than others. For me, it's taken a long time to where you get to the point where you just don't care what society tells you. And you wear what you want, and you do what you want. I think you can get there, but it takes work, and you know, you have to be conscious of it before you can get over it. You've got to know what they are. So what you're doing is important.